Many of us have been conditioned to think of knowledge as something that you arrive to, get a hold of, and forever possess thereafter. In regards to the mundane and the technical, that is essentially the case. You must first learn how to use a tool before you can utilize it. You must learn an alphabet before you can read. You must learn carpentry before you can carpent. But for certain types of knowledge, this model is insufficient. For achieving and sustaining certain states of being, this model is inadequate. And before I go into this any further, I want to remind you that I'm by no means an authority on anything. The ideas that I present aren't necessarily meant to be taken at face value. For a while now, I've said that I have the best audience one can have, and I believe that we have a sort of special relationship. A mutual interest in getting closer to the truth has allowed for us to set aside initial differences in perspective and dogma without compromising our beliefs. That basic bond has allowed us to exchange ideas and beliefs along the road to a greater understanding, and that is one of the most precious things anyone can experience. Ultimately, what I'm getting at is that my ideas can change drastically over a short period of time. I don't believe that I can arrive to some sort of special knowledge or profound fact that will turn me into a spiritual big brain or esoteric smarty pants. Frankly, one of the things I do best is being wrong. So, if possible, just keep that in mind and remember that this is an ongoing process. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. Some of you are already familiar with the exploits of a man who went by the name of Jack Parsons. I won't lay out his entire biography, as numerous videos made by people more talented than myself already do that. However, I realize that some of you may not know who he was, so here's the basics. Jack Parsons was a rocket scientist and occultist. He never obtained any degrees through higher education, and yet he managed to work on a multitude of sophisticated projects throughout his life. Without a doubt, he possessed a very talented mind. However, this is where the pleasant stuff ends. The first time I saw Jack Parsons and that stupid mustache of his, I immediately thought that he was compensating for something. And sure enough, he was. Secondly, I mentioned that he was not just a rocket scientist, but also an occultist. Aleister Crowley, who was a real bastard and a fat jackass, had created something called Thelema. Like most satanic schools of thought, its origins involved making contact with some sort of non-human entity. As it usually goes, the non-human entity will then claim to be known by many names, that it's been around for a long time. And then, it will announce its name, which is always bull. Then, the human it contacted will seize upon that knowledge or power, and will go on to do evil things for short-term pleasures and impermanent gains. If you think I'm being cynical, I assure you, I'm not. If you are so inclined, look up the origin story of Thelema and compare it to the origin story of the Temple of Set, which is yet another satanic order. Then, start comparing the similarities to other cults and satanic orders, and lo and behold, you might just notice some very obvious patterns. And by the way, it is apparently considered a faux pas within these organizations to refer to them as satanic. Ah yes, how insensitive and small-minded of me. Geez, what'll I do next? Say that the Church of Scientology shouldn't be taken seriously? And that brings me to my next point. When I first became aware of the occult, I began to develop the notion that it was a sort of gravity well. It was trying to pull me in, but in a way that I couldn't quite put into words. Dang, I thought, I'd sure like to know the secrets of the universe, but, you know, I just don't think I could ever engage in blood or sex magic. That stuff sure seemed dark, and plus, I'm not really into harming myself or others for the sake of tapping into powerful forces. For me, that's where I drew the line. No creepy rituals for old Faceless, I said. But for some people, like Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, the sky was the limit. When Jack Parsons wasn't playing with fireworks or admiring big black rockets, he could usually be found in the desert, participating in blood and sex magic. You know, as one does. Sometimes Jack would do things like shuck his corn, while L. Ron Hubbard scanned the astral planes, which I'm pretty sure is code for getting a boner. Yep, that's right. Before ol' Hubbard gifted the world with Scientology and Battlefield Earth, he engaged in all sorts of morbid and dark acts with his, masculine friend. And just to be clear, all joking aside, blood and sex magic is more than just nonsense. Results can be achieved through various depraved acts, but most people are sane enough to understand that whatever they get out of it will never be worth the price that they pay. On a very basic level, many people realize that there are lines not worth crossing. However, most people are also completely unaware of the existence of these forces and the occult. And unfortunately, many of the people that are aware of such things are completely willing to sell their soul in return for petty gains. Anyway, to make a long story short, Jack Parsons engaged in a series of rituals meant to open up a sort of gateway between our world and the next. According to a cult principle, since Jack was the one who had opened the gateway, only he could close it. However, at the age of 37, Jack discovered that he was no longer valuable as a living creature to the strange and dark force that he had so devoutly served, and thus he became a dead man. Jack had touched the sun, and he paid the price, and all the while, the gateway that he had worked to create remained open. In part 1 of this series, I said that I felt like something occurred right around the time of the Second World War that necessitated the creation of the modern security state. I asked, what was it that was so important that it required a compartmentalized world to be built around it? Then, I stated, I may have found the answer. Between then and now, my mind has changed. I was going to point out the same thing that a guy named Justin Fall does in a documentary called Higher Entities. In the interviews that I have seen, Justin references an FBI document directly tied to the occult. An academic or researcher was essentially giving his 2 cents to the FBI on the matter of that gateway that old Jack had left open. But honestly, I don't even know if the document was given to the FBI by an independent operator, or if it was created in the first place because of FBI interest in the matter. I originally intended to put forward the idea that a systematic engagement between authorities and otherworldly entities began to take place at that time, but frankly, it doesn't fit into my timeline. I specifically get the sense that things started getting froggy before the outbreak of the Second World War, and these events all occurred after that. So, if you'll stay with me for a bit longer, homies, I'll attempt to share what it is that I'm thinking. Many of my subscribers are Christians, or view the world through a religious perspective, and we have a sort of understanding between us. While I don't go out of my way to call anyone wrong or disagree for the sake of disagreeing, I also systematically avoid using terms and frameworks overtly associated with any particular ideology. I'm sure that a lot of you out there are keenly aware of this fact. But anyway, this dynamic has essentially resulted in my being able to reach as wide an audience as possible without boxing myself in. It's definitely rubbed a few Christians the wrong way, and sometimes I've behaved less than admirably towards others, but for the most part, there's nothing but goodwill between myself and the audience. However, there's another aspect to this dynamic that I never considered. What happens if we realize that we're telling the same story, only with different terms? Imagine that this is the universe, or our world, or whatever you want to call it. A copy of it has begun to manifest itself and pull away, with the intent of becoming a lesser fractal. This rebellious force is literally dragging itself out of creation and diving into a little hole it's cut out for itself. For us, since we exist inside of this framework, this takes the form of things like suffering and what many of us would call evil. In other words, if the original universe or the major fractal is closer to the true nature of existence, then many of us would want to do everything we could in order to remain as close as possible to it. Conversely, since the other thing is pulling away with all of its might, determined to rebel and destroy, it brings with it things such as pain and deception. For those of you who approach this through a certain perspective, you might call the original creation something along the lines of God, and the other force that rebels, Lucifer. And don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming that God and Satan are merely inanimate forces. All I'm saying is that these are extremely powerful things, and since we live within the confines of these constructs, the struggle between them quite literally represents the most important things in all of our lives. Consider that in order for this rebellious force, this bad thing, to successfully pull away from creation and achieve its goal, it would necessitate the creation of a lesser fractal that works within the framework of the original. What that would look like to us is transhumanism, giving up our bodies in order to step into the black box, a construct within a construct, a lesser fractal built on rebellion, inversion. I said that this rebellious force would manifest itself to us in terms of pain and suffering, and trust me, that is an understatement. For one, these things can quite literally be sentient for all I know, and thus they would be able to engage with us as more than just forces of nature. Because this thing is pulling itself away from creation, from that which is good, it is necessarily evil. It would quite literally be the thing that attempts to lure you into the lesser fractal through trickery and insidious methods. Right now, as many of us find ourselves deeply concerned about what's coming, there exists an opposing mindset. This is a bit simplistic, but just stay with me here. There are certain people out there who believe that they are on the verge of some sort of great salvation. But when you take a step back and look at it, it's all inverted and twisted. It's all ugly and wrong. It's all inside out. Oh, we would have had our utopia long ago, if only it wasn't for those intolerant Christians. If only the world didn't suffer the evils of racism and patriarchy, things would be so much better. I can't wait for the system to give me my injections so that things can go back to normal. And after I get my shots, I'm going to get my Neuralink chip. Then, I'm going to dispose of my body completely, and I will step into the black box, which will be my paradise. As oversimplified as this analogy is, I think a lot of you will get exactly what I'm trying to communicate. That construct, that black box, it's hell. It is the lesser fractal, the creation built upon uncreation. Because we exist in a world where forces greater than ourselves exist, something like the beast system is not only necessitated, but it is also completely predictable. In order to create the lesser fractal, the system must become more authoritarian and controlling. I mean, you can't just have an unstable world doing whatever it wants, filled with Christians and natural human beings who aren't tagged and tracked, right? The lesser fractal, or hell, requires the drawing of a line in the sand. And right now, there are many who will eagerly cross that line, just so that they can get the latest Windows Boy mandated injections. Complete inversion, that's the main component of the lesser fractal. It will drag as many of us into the construct as possible, and it will attempt to do so by any and every underhanded means at its disposal. It wraps its tendrils around us as much as it can, and then it uses those tendrils to pull us into hell. I suppose if you approached this from a certain perspective, you might call those tendrils by another name, that name being sin. I know many people, both Christian and non-Christian, who believe that the blockchain and cryptocurrency are the best means to resist the system. No, homies, I must disagree. The blockchain is part of the lesser fractal of the Luciferian construct. We will not have access to technology in the same ways we have become accustomed to unless we give it our consent. There will be no rebelling against the beast system via the internet. You can disagree with me, and I won't blame you, but homies, the writing is on the wall. The system and those playing into its hands will think of us as being excluded. In actuality, the system is tightening its grip around everything, demanding full control, and then going into that little hole it cut out for itself. Sorry, Babylonian debt slavery, I was never that into you in the first place. Sorry, internet, as cool as you've been to me, I just feel that maybe we should start seeing other people. It won't be the digital blockchain that will help us in this fight, homies. It's the human blockchain. It is the telling of this story to others. It is the act of bringing others into the light that will be the key to our success. Our dependence upon and comfort with the technologies we have become accustomed to is simply one of the insidious methods by which the construct attempts to pull us down with it. You can disagree, and you can do what you want, but technology is nothing more than a force of nature, and essentially, it was always guaranteed to have this one outcome: complete and total control, an authoritarian clampdown, and finally, it will disappear completely up its own asshole. There are multiple aspects to all of this. For instance, technology has made life better or more convenient for many of us. The internet has enabled us to share information in a way we didn't previously think possible. The example I used earlier of the type of person that is most eager to step into the black box, that isn't necessarily accurate either. The machine will pull in all sorts of people, and many of them will call themselves Christians. Many of them will wear stupid red hats, and many of them won't fit into a convenient paradigm at all. However, at the core of it, for those who have agency, there will always be a conscious choice made. It is inevitable, however subtle, however indirect, it will be demanded that we all make a choice. And it won't be as simple as saying, oh, well, I'll make the right choice, and then I won't think about it ever again. At some point, all of us will lose access to the very medium that has allowed us to connect this way in the first place. We won't always be able to share ideas and communicate as freely online as we do now, homies. But remember, no matter what the machine appears to take away from us, it is actually liberating us. And no matter how wonderful or convenient the internet is, it is merely a lesser fractal of that which already exists. In other words, no matter what, the story will continue to be told, and together we are unbreakable. The beast will take away our ability to easily communicate, or our ability to buy and sell. The beast will come after all of us through its willing agents, and ultimately the beast will take many of our lives. But hey, beast, you are a monster, and you'll never get what's inside, and you know that I know that that's what you're after. Put it all simply, homies, you might say something along the lines of, sacrifice and the act of bringing others into the light is the key to salvation. It is not a qualified point that you simply reach and never have to think about again, but instead it is a state of being. You must continuously share the tale and act in the best interest of others. In part 1 of this series, I was going to declare that aliens from other planets, or extraterrestrials as we imagine them, don't exist. I was going to declare that it was in fact interdimensional beings that were the source of the otherworldly technologies that are being dangled in front of us like bait. But no, friends, it's not that simple. Some people cling so desperately and insecurely to their beliefs that they claim to know the size of all of existence. If learning that space is actually vast and exotic challenges you to the core, then you haven't realized that higher truth exists independently of what you do or do not know. If your worldview necessitates existence be relegated to a small and confined space, then perhaps you have missed the mark. Consider, if you will, that every time someone has claimed to know precisely how everything works, they get proved wrong. Consider that every model ever created in all of existence is at least partially inaccurate, and that the very nature of language perpetuates a degree of inaccuracy in everything we relay. Consider that it's not simply the accuracy of what we state that matters so much, but that we continue to have the intent to become ever more accurate. If world leaders stood on a stage tomorrow and unveiled the existence of extraterrestrials, it does not shake my beliefs to their core. Consider that a great deception, like any powerful inversion, takes truth and uses it to perpetuate falsehood. Consider that since the black box necessitates the downgrading of every truth and truism by at least one order of magnitude, then a grand unveiling of something like the existence of extraterrestrials would serve to perpetuate the agenda of that diabolical force. But that doesn't mean that extraterrestrials aren't real, or that the entirety of what is unveiled is false. Rather, those who willingly step forth into the construct will go into it believing that they have been generously provided with the most profound knowledge one could imagine, and all the while they will remain blind to that which matters above all else. You could choose to write all of this off, and you could choose to buy into everything I have said uncritically. However, if you walk that fine line between complete dismissal and total acceptance, you might just discover what so many of us are after.